A Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom. Giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, Bashim Rakakadash, double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us this truth. Salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquathemi. Listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house during these times. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick on Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, it's going to be something along the lines of stop thinking so poorly of yourself, shun negative thoughts, because sometimes a lot of our experiences of things we experiences in the world, experiencing from either from family members or women we've dealt with, or just wicked people we had encounters with, those experiences, can maybe have a foothold in our minds in thinking that we're a lot, thinking that we're inferior, that we're not upright, that we're not, the way the Lord actually created us to be. And now that we're actually, as Paul said in Romans, we're not conformed to the ways of this world, but we're transformed in the renewing of our minds. To roughly paraphrase, we walk, more uprightly, and essentially to, remember, conduct, and basically remember um that we're not the they clone Tyrones and teachers and so on and so forth that Esau has basically portrayed us to be, right. And also, we're not um don't allow those negative thoughts to basically have a foothold in your mind, but essentially to shun those things, to rebuke those things, right, because we don't conduct ourselves as that way, because the Lord created us to be a nation of kings and priests, right. As a matter of fact, I'll start off with that, and then I'll get something that in Wisdom of Solomon. This is just a bit of a boost in the way we meditate and we think about ourselves, right. So this is Exodus 19. This is Exodus 19 and 5, and it says, therefore, if you obey my voice indeed, keep my covenant, and ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. So already right there we understand that we're above all these other nations, right. So this is verse 6, and it says, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel, right? So you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, and you speckled birds that may look like the other nations, but your spirit, your seed goes back to the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? We're the Lord's peculiar treasure and the Lord's special people, right? We're supposed to be a holy nation, right? Um, and knowing these things and knowing the accounts of our forefathers, it produces a certain level of uprightness, right? And understanding that, we are not, those bywords that we were called, right. So, but sometimes, because we understand we're under curses at the moment, and certain things that we experience, we allow a lot of these different thoughts to inhabit our minds, right, to make us feel like we're inferior, right. So the thing is, it's really warfare. Remember to shun those things and even discipline those things too, right. All those thoughts that we might think about, you know um those thoughts, a lot of them are, they're basically designed to kind of bring you down to a lower level. They're not essentially bringing you onto a higher vibration, right. And a lot of it comes from actually being, in this flesh, you know so I want to read this here, because this is just part of the condition of the battle, and actually having these corruptible, excuse me, these corruptible bodies, right. And this is part of our, essentially, some of the fights that we go through. A lot of the fights that we go through are strongly, within our minds, right? So this is Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 9, verse 15. And it says, "For the corruptible body presseth down the soul, and the earthly tabernacle weigheth down the mind, that museth upon many things," right? So let me get the word museth just for more clarity and understanding. Just bear with me. Let me just look it up. Etymology. Okay, so to muse in the etymology, it says here to reflect, ponder, meditate, to be absorbed in thought, to ponder, to dream, to wander, to loiter, to waste time, which is of uncertain origin. It says to stand with one nose in the air. It says also, um, it says to muzzle, to sniff about, right? So basically, to be basically you're more occupied in certain, so you might entertain certain thoughts, that are not essentially profitable, that actually make you feel and think that you're less of a person. You don't want to entertain thoughts like that. You want to rebuke thoughts like that and entertain more holy, thoughts, right? Because it's really because you're constantly bombarded, right? You might see certain things, or you might, certain thoughts might come into your mind, and you might think, man, why do I think so poorly of myself? What I'm saying? And so a lot of it sometimes is tied to a lot of the things that we went through, in the world, and we're still going through a process of being healed, right? So that's why we're basically think of it, think of ourselves as, you know, when you read the story, I think it's in Mark, the fifth chapter. There's a story of a woman, and basically the woman, she had I think it was a blood issue for 12 years. Think of ourselves as that woman and grabbing onto Yahweh's garment, and that's all she wanted to do, when you think about it. And there was a whole crowd, and then I think it was one of the disciples said, like, yo, why well, actually it was Yahweh that said, "Who touched my clothes?" And the disciples replied, and they said, like, whoa, we see all these people like thronging thee, we see all these people moving thee about, right? So think of us, as a hopeful elect, like, us as that woman that all she wanted to do was grab onto Yahweh's garment, right? Because the script, Yahweh even said it himself. They that are whole don't need a physician, but they that are sick, right? So, let me get that. Hold on. In regards to Yahweh being, likened unto a physician, right? Um, let's hold on. Oh, that's in Sirach. One second. This is Sirach chapter 38, verse 9. And it says here, "My son, in thy sickness be not negligent, but pray unto the Lord, he will make thee whole," right? So a sickness is not always, referring to like a physical sickness. A lot of us have certain mental ailments, and challenges, that we go through, and even myself included, that we go through, that make us, feel like, okay, make us feel like, that try and draw us back into making us feel like we were inferior. So, right. But, we understand, we're essentially, like I read before, we're a nation of kings and priests. We're a royal people unto the Lord thy power. The Lord have chosen thee to be a special people above all these other nations, right? And this is information that, as a culture, this wasn't passed down from, our parents. Our parents didn't actually teach us this, and we understand our nation as a whole. The nation is sick. There's putrefying sores. They need ointment, right? Essentially they need a physician, right? So we're grabbing onto that, like I was saying before, we're grabbing onto that, that physician's garment to be able to actually heal us and make us more whole. As a matter of fact, let me get the word whole, right? So whole means in the etymology, it says entire, it says unhurt, uninjured. It means healthy, healed, sound, genuine. It says here complete, right? Oh, it says salvation, welfare, right? So true, we're really going to be more whole, once we're freed, from these uncorrupt, these corruptible, I should say, bodies that we're in, right? So the Lord can actually dwell within us, right? So it says straightforward, it says healthy, you know, um, that's pretty much the point. So essentially, just being in more of a healthy state of mind, right? But this is just some of the things that we go through, within our day to day and our week to week, right? But a lot of it, from what I've observed, a lot of these thoughts can inhabit our minds, right? And it's basically to shun a lot of those negative thoughts and not entertain them, right? And if I'll say this too, if there's anything I've learned, in thinking about yourself more positively, essentially it opens up your mind to thinking about more about um, miracles, and even going to this coupled with understanding what the Lord, the power of the Lord, like the example, like miracles and so on and so forth. Thinking more positive. When you think more positively about yourself, and coupled with the understanding of the stories, the things the Lord did for us. It paints an image in the mind where and understand like, oh, the Lord can do this for me, right? The Lord is able to do this, as opposed to living in the corruptible body, in the corruptible mindset where, oh, the Lord can't do that for me. That's impossible, right? You don't live, you're not thinking like that. You're thinking more on a higher vibration, right? And I'll even say this, and I'll get another precept. um I had a situation when there was something like where I work. It requires me a specific like keychain to be able, like a specific like security tag to get into the workplace, and I didn't have it at that time. And I was going through all this situations and stuff like that. And I remember like on the way I was thinking about it. I was like, man, the Lord can easily perform, even if it's a major miracle or a small miracle, where someone can actually help me out and come to my intervention when I arrive at the job, right? So as soon as I arrive at the job, and I'm just saying this, not to brag, I'm just saying this as a testament, of faith, right? And as soon as I got to the job, that's exactly what happened. The Lord had somebody right there being able to help me to get into the facility, right? So, you know, it was just me, but a lot of it is just started with me, how I thought about myself, and coupled with what the power of the Lord can do. Because sometimes in the flesh, we tend to put limitations on what the Lord can do for us, right? So, let me get this in Proverbs and I'll continue. I just wanted to share that real quick. Just bear with me. Let me just get this. This is Proverbs chapter 23, verse 7. And it says, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, saith he to thee, but in his heart is not with thee. It says in the AMP, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. In behavior, one who manipulates, say he says to you, eat and drink, yet his heart is not with you, but it is begrudging the cost, right? So it's very important, how you think about yourself. And it also mentions the word behavior, right? So when you think about yourself as somebody who is more upright, you're going to conduct yourself as someone who is in accordance to that thought, right? Nobles behave in a certain way because they understand that they are nobles, and that we are the true nobles, right? We are the true nobles. We are the true stewards, right? So, you don't think of yourself as a degenerate. You don't think of yourself as a slimy ass, adulterous, type of person, right? You shun those kinds of behaviors because you understand those behaviors are not behaviors of nobles, right? you know and another point, I wanted to add on as well is understanding what makes us think more positively about ourselves is actually learning more about our gifts and what we're capable of doing, because there are certain talents the Lord gave us to be able to actually go into certain things which can actually make you more somebody who is confident, someone who is more um, you think a lot more positively about yourself because you excel in this particular area, right? And Paul briefly kind of touches on this in First Corinthians, the 12th chapter. The different diversities of gifts, right? So you might have a particular gift. That's a good thing if you know that. Continue and like essentially sharpen that, right? So let me get that on a gift. One second. Let's see, Proverbs, is it 18? Hold on. Okay, this is Proverbs chapter 18, verse 16, and it says this: a man's gift maketh room for him, and bringeth him among great men. And it says in AMP, a man's gift, I'm sorry, given in love or courtesy, makes room for him and brings him before great men, right? So you might have a particular gift you're able to excel in that's actually be very beneficial to brothers around you. They're beneficial to the ministry, right? Those things are very very important, because where your gift can actually help somebody out in a time of need, right? So knowing your gift and being able to utilize it to the best, and and get more understanding more about your gift can actually help out another, right? So that is a great form of charity. That is utilizing your gift, that ability is able you're able to comfort others, right? Whether it might be having a listening ear, or maybe you're able to go into a different language, or maybe you're very you know you're very you have a gift of healing and so on and so forth, right? All these things are very very beneficial, right, in how you think about yourself. I'm just targeting this same point, but just from a different angle, because all these things are essentially a snowball effect and accumulate in how you positively think about yourself. You don't think about yourself as somebody who's a degenerate, right? We're a nation, as I said before, we're a nation of kings and priests, right, and princesses, right? So um I want to get two more, because that precept mentioned behavior, because we don't behave like the mass majority you know of our people in the worldly sense, right? Because they're conformed to the world, and Paul said don't be conformed to the ways of this world, to paraphrase, right? And it says here, Sirach chapter 19 verse 29, and it says, a man may be known by his look, one that hath understanding by his countenance when thou meetest him. A man's attire, excessive laughter, and gait shows what he is, right? So that word gait basically refers to the way you walk, right? So you have a way that you walk in a physical sense, but also refers to a way that you carry yourself. You don't carry yourself as a degenerate, and you understand that you put on, therefore, as Paul said, you put on therefore the elect, right? And I want to end off with that. We put on certain attributes that actually is supposed to cultivate a righteous kind of behavior, right? So all these things and remembering these things helps to shun those negative, thoughts that we might have, right? So I'm going to end off with this. Where was that? That's Colossians. One second. Colossians 3, verse 12. And it says here, put on, therefore, as the elect of the Most High, Yahweh Bashim Shai, holy and beloved bowels of mercies, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long suffering, forbearing one another, forgiving one another. If any man hath a quarrel against any, even as a Mashiach Yahweh Shai forgave you, also do ye. So we put on these different traits, and sometimes the Lord puts us in situations to exemplify these different traits, right? So um that's pretty much it, you know. Oh, a good example before I end off the lesson, right? A good example of that was, when you think about, even though David was, going through examples of righteous suffering, he had moments where he could have, you know, taken vengeance upon King Saul, but he didn't do it, right? He knew his conscience or his heart. I believe it says in the precept in Samuel, his heart would smote him, right? So he understood that, okay, if he did this, it would look bad if he touched the Lord's anointed, right? So, you know, knowing those things, and, we walk, going back to everything, the character, strongly affects the way, we think about ourselves, right? Because we don't walk as a degenerate, right? Utilizing your gift is another avenue to be able to shun a lot of these negative thoughts, because we know that we're good. As a matter of fact, I'll end off. Okay, I did say this, but last one. This is Matthew 5, verse 16, and it says, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works, and ye glorify your Father which is in heaven. How was I speaking, right? So, it's just, targeting, you know, there's a multiple different, ways to kind of like counter those things and fortify your mind, right? Because we know it's conduct, having a gift, something that you're good at, you can actually lend, and being able to assist the body, right? And understanding that those things help to ward off those negative thoughts, right? So I'll leave the lesson there, but Lord's will, this lesson was, it was a bit all over the place, but I pray and sincerely hope it was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim El Shai. Till next time, I say Shalom.